Hello everyone, and welcome to Urban Nerd. So recently I was printing out the 3D puzzle cube by WildRoseBuilds, and I kind of did an oopsie in my 3D printing slicer settings, but actually turned out pretty interesting. But before we get to that, let me show you what it is. So it prints out in these different parts, just like this, and these parts will fit together to make a cube. Now, I'm not the best at this, and there's some things that I want to talk about these pieces and different settings that I was using while I was creating these. So these were printed off with Gizmo Dork's 3D printing filament. Now this is just a small set that I ordered off of Amazon, and there was a red one, but I used that all up. And this filament is very glossy and it's very vibrant in my opinion. Don't know how well the camera will pick up the vibrance of it. But I print this off using 215 Celsius, and this filament has been really great for what I really need it for. And I really like these spools that they use. There's a very nice aesthetic to them. And there's also these little catches for your 3D printing filament all over. There's 3 different places you can catch it on, and on the other side. But you really don't see that that often. I mean, I've had spools that only have one hole, and it kind of holds it, but you just gotta hope it doesn't come loose. Now, one issue that I have had with this filament is that it tends to be wrapped underneath other filaments. So as you're printing, you'll hear it sort of tugging as it's trying to free it underneath the filament. Now this actually happened with the red one while I was printing off a rosebud for Valentine's Day, and the extruder actually ended up cutting off the filament, so the print finished with only 10% of it actually printed out, and I had to throw it away, of course. So that was very frustrating to have an 8-hour print fail so early, since I headed to work, and as I got home there was nothing even printed. But this was also just a cheap set that I really wanted to get a variety of colors whenever I first started, and this was the best bet to go so I could experiment with it. So back to the prints themselves. Now I did print out a couple more than these 3, and I'll tell you why. So initially, whenever I printed out the green and the yellow, I started having this very strange rippling effect across the top, and this was at 5% infill. And I'll kind of get back to that later of why. But I was thinking, why it just doesn't make sense, It printed so smooth in the middle, but whenever I started making that upward V shape, it just kind of just fell apart. But if you smooth that down, I mean, it'll be fine. And I was also having some pretty strange stringing. And I'll explain later also why that's pretty strange compared to the oopsie print. Because essentially they were printed like this on the build plate. So the 3D printer had to go between this stand essentially and this. So I'll also get back to why the stringing is a little weird on this a little later. But these 3 pieces do end up fitting together. I'll do that a little later. So then, going back to the infill, I thought maybe if I increase the infill to about 15%, the lines would go away. And for the most part, they kind of did, but now you're getting smaller V's on the top, and now the stringing is also still apparent. So then I thought to myself, well, maybe it's the infill pattern itself. So I changed the infill pattern to just another random Cura setting that took the same amount of time. These took about an hour each, and it did turn out a little better, although now there's more unevenness that I can't explain. But it is a tad bit smoother and still stringing on the bottom of this one as well. So how do these parts fit together? Well, that's essentially the puzzle part. I've put these together before, but I'm definitely not the fastest at getting these together. So let's try to put them together. Okay. So once you get these 2, you just kind of have to slide them apart. So then you can fit the third piece, and I'm probably doing this wrong, but that's okay. That's why it's a puzzle. All right, and just like that, they all just kind of slide together. And it turns into something like this. Depending on what kind of colors you use, I figured that would make each piece a different color so that you could see just how it turns out. And I think that this turned out pretty well, although the yellow seems to be a little bit smaller and they don't fit in perfect, but that's all with 3D printing. So, to the oopsie part. Now, before I printed out something using spiral mode, and I forgot to turn spiral mode off. So I was wondering why this would only take half an hour. I was like, well, that sounds fine. That's a fast print. And then I looked at the 3D printer, and it was only printing one perimeter. So I rolled with it. I printed out 3 different colored parts, and these turned out actually really cool. As you can see, the middle part is actually completely hollow, and the layers are actually very smooth for the most part, which I found surprising since looking at the prints that were using infill, they had ridges on them, the ledge was uneven, so I don't know how exactly these turned out so well, and even the bridging in the middle turned out very well. So let's look how this one looks all put together, and the pieces are a lot louder since they're hollow. They kind of clank around, but I found that this one was actually much easier to put together, maybe because it flexes so much. It will also help if I put it in the right way. And these kind of slide together just like that. Now this one turned out very even, and the cube looks great. Now the pieces will separate a good amount compared to the other cube, which is a lot more solid. But this is what they look like. Now, I think that the oopsie actually turned out better than the original one that I was planning on printing, and that just shows that you really have to mess around with the settings in Cura. If you think something can go spiral, then it can, and if you think something can't spiral, just try it out. Since the perimeter is only just one line, you really don't waste so much plastic on it either. But I figured I would make this video on the puzzle cube, and it turned out to make a video on this different printing style essentially. And I think that these turned out excellent. So that's it for this video. Thanks for taking the time to watch it, and don't forget to comment and subscribe down below. I'll see you in the next one.